not having as quality problems, as too much shit to do, as opposed to not a quality problem.
Right.
Having to sell your refrigerator to buy crack. You gotta kind of figure it out. I was like, I was thinking about like, I listen to Alan Watts and read his books, and really interesting guy. To kind of take you out of yourself, which is a great thing. Just that's why our eyes point out, not in. To get out of yourself. And he was talking about like, don't look up to anybody, or like the idea of this God as this gray bearded old grandfather. And he said, I'm a grandfather. I said, I still consider myself to be quite foolish, and like, what do I know? So I don't anybody. So that's the way to go.
I always tell my grandkids, they'll ask me, how old are you? I say, I'm 17. And I try to get them to understand that I'm not an old guy, that inside we're gonna be active, and I can outrun every one of you. And so, but you're right about that, because it's that energy that you have inside, and you don't have to play the part of an old guy. No,
it's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. I mean, at the core of existence is an illusion. It's like they've never been able to see like an electron that, when it's not being looked at, maybe behaves differently. It's like the substances of what's in. I mean, what is the essence of you and me at its core? So the physicality of it, emptiness, and it's the same thing as this table. So technically, we could, if we were able to figure it out at some high level, walk through these atoms, because this is basically empty, So it's just it just what it does is it makes you realize, if you only think of the world as what you can see it, feel it, taste it, smell it, and hear it, you're missing out on at least half of what is really out there.
I love the way you think, because every day on iHeartRadio, I do a feature that's based on moving through the mountain, that there's nothing in your way. Just move through the mountain.
Yeah, but you have to, though. It's like you don't realize that you're indoctrinated into a system of thought, because that's what the brain does. The brain automatically, even if you don't see something, it will come up with an idea of what is, you're indoctrinated to assume that is. So in other words, you have a preconceived notion of what the world exists. As a matter of fact, I would say 90% of all the evil that happens in the world happens from people who believe that leaf, coming from the Anglo-Saxon word will, to willfully make the world as they think it already exists. And that's where that crazy fundamentalism exists in thinking. Not just with religiously, but like for people who are closed-minded. And that's where the problems start from, when they take away the mystery of the world.
And what a crazy world this is right now.
Yeah, it is a crazy world. But at the same time, it's like my wife attends a lovely Catholic church, and I'm a Buddhist, and she's Catholic. And but the Catholic priest said something very interesting last week for the parishioners. He made the comments of saying that evil is just louder than good. And it makes sense. And it is louder, but there's far more good than evil. There's a great Hindu game that they teach children, and it's a Hindu dice game. And so the children kind of know the good and bad. Kind of the best roll that they can get is a 4, and it represents a square, which all the sides reflect off each other, and it represents perfection and harmony. Wow. And like the second best roll you can get is a 3, which is a triangle, 2 positive sides, 1 negative side. And the third best or second worst roll you can get is a 2, which are 2 parallel lines that reflect off each other and kind of count each other out. And the worst roll you can get is a 1, which is just a single line representing a negative form. It doesn't reflect off anything. So roughly, if you count up the negatives and the positives in this game, it's roughly 2/3 positive, 1/3 negative. In other words, 2/3 good, 1/3 bad. In other words, there's just enough bad to make good work harder,
Don't you
to make the
think
game worth the candle.
If we would take the time to look beyond the lyrics and actually activate things other than what we're programmed to do, we would find that peace.
Yeah, what you're talking about is just taking a moment to separate yourself and to think. There was a Buddhist leader that I got to meet with from India. His name was Adnan Garaji. And you talk to him, he doesn't just talk like you and I are talking. Like, ask me, how are you doing?
How are you doing? Oh, really?
Good. I'm doing good. And then, like, I was having breakfast with him, or lunch with him, and I go, so how was the flight over here? Ask me how the flight over here.
How was the flight?
It was nice. And I finally asked him, why do you take so long to talk between? I was gently, after about a half hour of this, and he said to me, because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Wow.
I want to think about stuff before I say anything. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And that's the way he operates. And he doesn't just say it like I do. He lives it, and that's a way better way to go. And like, it doesn't accept praise or blame. It's like if you say, "Man, you're really an amazing person," and he would say to you, "God manifests Himself in a variety of things because it's, blah blah blah." And I think, and without the negativity, and it's great. I mean, what it really is an example. Like all great myths, is just an example of how to potentially live a decent, good life. That's what it is. And that's what we're looking for. That's why the world needs a new religion. And that's why I'm going to start it.
What would you call it?
Scientology. No, the science of... no. What would I call it? I mean, I think...
Does it have to have a title?
No. I mean, well, truthfully, that's a good question. It shouldn't, because, what they call, what is Zen Buddhism? You have to describe it by what it isn't. It's not a religion. It's not a philosophy. You have to do. It's the potential. Anybody says they know what Zen Buddhism is a fraud. So I'm not going to claim to say it is. You have to describe by what it isn't. I mean, it's possibly a way of realizing there's a unifying thing between you and the rest of the universe. Like, for instance, your feet work, but not just by themselves. Your feet aren't dangling in the air. They work with the ground, And like when you say, as Alan Watts says, when you like a glass of wine, you don't like the glass of wine separate from you. You like the wine with you together. So there's it's the idea that there's a separate you is just an idea. It's not a reality. And so what happens is people take this very limited view of themselves and make a reality off of that from this limited idea, and they think of themselves as a separate thing, and it's very lonely, and that's why you have some real problems in the world.
It's like this sheet of paper. It's a seed. It grew into a tree. The tree sacrificed its life so I could further my thought.
Right, but you're also limiting yourself by saying sacrificed.
Do you not think a tree sacrifices itself?
No, I don't think so. I don't think a tree wants to be chopped down.
Right.
But
right.
At the same time, it just goes with what's happening. The idea of value judgment on stuff, you have to just question. I mean, you have to make a value. You can say, like, I like this tea better than I like that tea. I think it's okay to make that kind of thing. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's... I think you're coming at it from a Western conquering kind of idea, which is a lot of... Western thought is thinking that nature is to be conquered. We conquered Mount Everest. There's like as if there's a conflict between nature and man, and there isn't. What happened was around the 17th century, God became embarrassing in the sense of, God, He's watching you all the time. Mm-hmm. He's looking at you. He knows what you're thinking. It's like, I don't know. So the philosophers became embarrassed by that idea, and so what they did was they got rid of the lawmaker, but they kept the laws, and those laws are science. But that's also a myth too. I mean, in the sense of, all science is a predictable idea for what of the future. And you do a series of experiments, and so you have a prediction from those experiments, and that is predicting the future in a way that you can say that's what's happened before. That's all it is.
Yeah. How do you train yourself to live in the presence of the present if we're overcrowded by 5 minutes ago versus where I'm going today? It's staying in that moment, the presence of the present.
Well, that's shutting out the noise and the clutter, and there's a lot of it. And that's a real challenge because there's so much in your face. How can you not go to your phone right now? I mean, it's the thing what Einstein says, whenever our technology overexceeds our ability to communicate, we'll have a generation of idiots. I'm kind of paraphrasing or butchering his statement, but that's true. How you can do that is shut out the noise as much as you can by being in the moment. Yeah. And there's a beautiful way to do that people don't even realize they're meditating. Anytime you're focusing on one thing, if it's a bike ride, if it's a nice conversation, if you're really with somebody, being with children, what they specifically need in that moment, getting outside of yourself. Anytime you can get outside, breathing deeply. You cannot be it's physiologically impossible to be stressed when you're just breathing deeply. You just can't do it. Your body won't let you. When you're breathing shallow, you can. As much as you can, stop a minute and just be in that moment. And that is the only one that exists anyway. But so much of us, our culture teaches us to think that you're supposed to get somewhere, and they'll tell you it's about the journey. And when if you accept that, then you're also accepting the fact that where you're at right now isn't where the best place to be, because there's some elusive goal that you're supposed to get at where you finally go, and then like you wake up and you're in your 40s, or 50s, and you go, what happened to that? I mean, you realize the culture's been lying to you. It's not the specific place. It's just every place that you're at is perfectly fine.
That's like, I'll go up the street to the Billy Graham Library.
Yeah.
Not to go up there for Billy Graham, but I love watching people and the energy they bring with them.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to sit on that bench and just watch them walk by.
Right. And truthfully, the more you're beaten down in life, the better chance you have to be more human in that sense. And that's why, and the more interaction you can have with people, but you can easily be thrown out. And the thing, what I'm talking about what I said before about no judgment. I mean, when I was in Taiwan, I was at a Zen Buddhist temple, and you have very badly behaving monks. In the sense of they get angry, they drink. Buddhism was reformed by the Chinese, and they drink and they get married. They can get married, they can have family, because it's not to be a Buddhist outside the world, but be a Buddhist in the world. And so that's just a better way of doing it, to challenge the person. It's easier to not get upset if you're not in traffic every day or something. So I think the idea is just to be tested and allow yourself to not swing out as much.
Yeah.
And if I had to say the difference, I try to explain the difference, because I was starting to do meditation, doing yoga, and I was doing it for the first few years. And finally, the Zen Buddhist master asked me, he said, do you notice any difference? And a Japanese guy. And I went, no, I don't notice any difference at all. And he said, I said, well, I'm in better shape now, I'm doing yoga, blah, blah. So you don't know this in your mind. And I went I don't think so. He said, think again. I want you to think and come back to me. And I said, oh, great. Now I got another assignment. So I came back and I said, well, maybe I have 1 second more to think before I react. And he said, oh, that's very big. That's very important. And I said, 1 second before I react? That's big. And I thought that's nothing. I thought I would get 10 minutes to react, Anyway, so I had a new car, and I had, this is how sometimes things get explained to you. The universe explains to you when you're being an idiot, like I was. I had a new car, and it was there was this thing on the what do you call it? That goes up to block the sun. The visor. So the visor came out, and there's a thing about airbags. And, let me read this. So I started reading about the airbags, and when you read about the airbags, and I started looking into it, the airbag inflates in 0.2 of a second. The airbag will inflate, and injury happens at 0.375, and death happens at 0.8. So a second will save your life. If you have a second to react in every situation. Imagine you go to coffee and the guy who spills your coffee, whatever, you got a second before you go, hey dude, or whatever, or somebody's late or whatever. You have a second before you decide I'm going to let that bother me. If you can go through your life, take that second, use that second, and decide, I'm not going to let that get to me.
When are you going to put this in a book? I mean, come on. I
am writing a book.
Is it going to be about spirituality? I mean, because
it's going to be about spirituality and the world and both, and failure and accepting failure and realizing that that's part of the whole deal.
Yeah, you can't have success without failure.
Oh yeah, well, success. I mean, failure is an integral part. It's the other side of it. You'll never find a one-sided coin. And you try to. If you take a magnet and you slice a magnet, the north side off of the south side, the part that you cut off will now become the south side. You know what I'm saying? It will still be there. You can't get rid of it. So there's two sides will always be there, the north and south side. So it's so is the same of every situation. And as you go through life, you're an idiot unless you continue to look at that other side and you realize, well, these failures are leading you to a success point, and they're leading you to a place where you're supposed to learn something. And maybe your idea of success needs to be altered, because it's really about that experience and about your being there for that. And again, when you take judgment away from that, when you define success in a bigger way, like I had, it's so easy in our culture to say, well, that was a failure. But if that led you to a place that was, more beautiful, like I have a new show on it's coming out on Netflix December 1st, and it's about me just being an a-hole, basically. And I really like it, but I really want to give a selfish version of what not to do, basically, and it's a part of me that is a funny thing, but I would have never gotten to do that show unless I would have had a failure or what was considered, in show business, a failure on a show that was like on a major, biggest network at the time. So you have to, as much as you can, divest that false sense of ego, which is another thing that doesn't really exist. And so these are things that you can, as you grow older, and if you allow yourself to to be humbled by the world, it can potentially get you into a more interesting place, just like a piece of marble can turn into something beautiful.
I love it. You're at the Comedy Zone this weekend.
Comedy Zone this weekend.
Two shows tonight?
Just 2 shows, yeah. Hopefully I'll have more jokes than I've done in this thing. But there will be, at its essence, I do in the last 10 minutes, I talk about Zen Buddhism.
Good.
With dick jokes in the middle of it. To keep the audience's attention. But I do it because what I try to do is give them, to give people just to shake all good gurus ever do is to just make you question your idea of reality in a safe place, but makes you question it and try to defend it, and make you look at things from a place that you're not expecting it. To attack you in a way where your indoctrination of the world is vulnerable.
I love your heart. You have such a beautiful heart.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you.